I was 2 days into my first real leave in 8 months. 2 days. I'd spent the first one sleeping off jet lag from deployment, and the second half sleeping while catching up on laundry and ignoring my phone. I wasn't planning anything big, just peace and quiet. You'd think that wouldn't be too much to ask for someone who'd been on a carrier for half a year. Then my sister showed up at my door. No call, no warning, just standing there with a suitcase, 3 kids, and the kind of fake smile that always meant one thing with her: she wanted something. "Rachel," she said, like we hadn't barely spoken in a year. "I need a huge favor. You're gonna love this. You get to spend real quality time with your nieces and nephew." I blinked at her. "Sandra, what?" Before I could process what was happening, the kids were inside my house, running straight to my living room like they lived there. The oldest, Ethan, kicked off his shoes and immediately grabbed my remote. Lily was yelling something about snacks. The youngest one, I think her name is Molly, just started crying. Sandra shoved the suitcase into my hands. "I'm going to Florida. 10, maybe 12 days. I need a reset. You're in the Navy. You can handle chaos. You've got discipline. Plus, you're off, right? You're not doing anything." I stared at her. "Are you serious?" She laughed. "Rachel, you don't have kids. This is your chance to see what it's like. Besides, you owe me after all those years Mom and Dad bailed you out." That part hit me sideways. I served 16 years in the Navy. I've been deployed more times than I can count, worked my way through a male-dominated system, held my own through crises and command transitions, but somehow, in Sandra's world, I was still the baby sister who got away easy. Before I could respond, she kissed the kids on the top of their heads, called out something about, "Don't burn the place down," and walked out, drove off in her dusty SUV like it was a normal Saturday errand. I stood in the doorway for a good minute, suitcase in hand, door wide open, wondering if I was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. The crying didn't stop. Molly was still sobbing in a weird, raspy way that made me think she hadn't had water in a while. I crouched down next to her. "You thirsty, sweetheart?" She nodded. So, that's how it started. No warning, no instructions, no emergency contact sheet, no medication notes, nothing. And here's the kicker: Sandra didn't answer her phone for the next 3 days. Not once. Straight to voicemail. No texts back, just vanished. Let me be clear, I'm trained to handle pressure. I've dealt with live fire exercises, onboard fires, emergency evacuations in the middle of the Pacific. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for taking care of 3 kids who had clearly never heard the word structure in their lives. The first night, I tried to cook a basic dinner: spaghetti, store-bought meatballs, garlic bread. Ethan complained that it wasn't Chick-fil-A. Lily poured orange soda into her pasta. Molly refused to eat unless she was sitting on the counter. Bedtime was a battle. No toothbrushes in their bags, no pajamas. Just a pile of clothes that smelled like they'd been balled up in the backseat for weeks. By the second morning, I found Ethan watching TV at 4:45 a.m., eating Doritos straight from the bag, and refusing to get off the couch. "Don't you have school today?" I asked. "Not my problem," he said. "You're the adult." I'd like to say I responded calmly, like a reasonable human being, but I didn't. I snapped. I told him to shut the TV off, sit down, and act like someone who hadn't been raised by wolves. He laughed in my face. "Whatever, lady, you just bark orders like on a ship or something." That stung, more than it should've, because I realized something right then: these kids didn't respect me. Not because they were evil or bratty or ungrateful, but because no one had ever taught them to respect anyone. They were surviving, alone, and worse, they thought that was normal. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, you'll get this. The one everyone dumps problems on because you can handle it, but no one asks if you want to. No one ever thinks maybe you're also tired, or hurting, or just trying to keep your life from falling apart. That moment with Ethan, that was it for me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and wrote down 3 names on a piece of paper. Ethan, Lily, Molly. Then I wrote underneath, "This house is not a free-for-all." That's when I started building what I knew best: a system. Not Navy-level drills, but structure. Wake-up times, meal routines, screen limits, Nothing extreme, just stability. And no surprise they hated it. Lily called me a tyrant. Ethan told me I was brainwashed. Molly tried to run out the front door in her socks. But I didn't back down. Because somewhere in the middle of that chaos, I realized, if I didn't care enough to fight for these kids, no one would. And hey, if you've ever had to clean up after your family's mess, or step into a role you didn't sign up for, leave a comment below. I want to hear how you handled it. And if this story's got you hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. By the fourth day, Molly finally ate a meal without crying. Lily said, "Thank you," without being reminded. And Ethan, well, he challenged me to a push-up contest, so I figured that was progress. The silence in the house shifted. It wasn't peaceful, but it wasn't hostile either. Something was changing, not overnight, not with some cheesy movie moment, but slowly, tangibly. And just when I thought I was finding a rhythm, I opened my inbox and saw an email that made my stomach turn. It wasn't from Sandra, it was from the bank, and it wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to me. I clicked the email, already bracing for some scam. What I didn't expect was a fraud alert from my bank. The subject line read, "Suspicious credit activity, Lieutenant R. Myers." And the address wasn't mine, it was my sister's. She used my name, my rank. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe some glitch, maybe someone using a similar name. But the billing address on the file? Sandra's old apartment. A card issued 6 months ago. Charges for restaurants, gas, Amazon orders, and this one stopped me cold. 2 kids' tablets from Best Buy. I sat there, staring at the screen, heat rising to my neck. I wasn't just babysitting now. I was cleaning up a mess I didn't even know existed. Sandra hadn't just dumped her kids, she'd used my identity. She'd gone behind my back and impersonated me to open a credit line she never intended to pay back. And the cherry on top? My military title was attached to the account. If this got flagged the wrong way, it could follow me back into service. I printed the statement, filed it away, and shut the laptop. Not out of denial, out of control. Control I needed to keep, because 3 kids were about to come barreling down the hallway, demanding waffles, and the last thing they needed was a screaming adult, adding to their trauma. I made a choice right then: compartmentalize. Treat it like a tactical operation. First priority, secure the unit. Then, handle the breach. I kept up the routine, woke them at 7, breakfast at 7:30, screen time off by 8, chores by 9. It wasn't perfect, but the house started to feel less like a war zone and more like something manageable. They fought it, sure. Ethan kept pushing, testing every limit like he was waiting for me to break. Lily went quiet and moody, drawing strange little pictures and hiding them in drawers. Molly refused to sleep unless she was curled up on the couch under my old navy jacket. But they were showing signs, tiny, stubborn signs that they were adjusting. What unsettled me most wasn't their behavior. It was what I found when I started going through their school bags. Crumpled homework with failing grades. Unread notes from teachers. A field trip form from over a month ago unsigned. A letter from the school counselor about continued concerns regarding home stability. I called the school, pretending to be a concerned aunt who was stepping in temporarily. The woman on the phone, clearly exhausted, said something that chilled me. "Oh, thank God. We haven't heard back from Sandra in months. We weren't sure anyone was actually looking after those kids." She hadn't even responded to the school? This wasn't just irresponsibility. This was neglect. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to suspect Sandra had no intention of coming back anytime soon, if ever. I started documenting everything. Photos of the kids' bruises, notes about their eating habits, medical needs, statements from the school. I wasn't thinking about revenge at this point. I was thinking about safety, legal safety, my safety. The tension between Ethan and me hit a peak on day 6. He got into a shouting match with Lily over the Xbox. When I stepped in to shut it down, he threw the controller across the room and yelled, "You're not my mom. You're just some bossy Navy freak who thinks she's in charge of everything." That should have pissed me off. A few years ago, it probably would have. But instead, I looked at him and said, "You're right, I'm not your mom. But I'm the only adult in this house who hasn't walked out on you." He didn't say anything after that, just stormed off and slammed the bedroom door. Later that night, I found a note under my door, folded in half, in Ethan's handwriting. Sorry for earlier. I just miss when things were normal. I don't hate you. That note broke something open in me. Not in a sad, emotional movie way. Just this quiet, solid shift. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to hold the damn line. So, I sat down and made my own kind of command plan. I wasn't in uniform, but I was back in mission mode. I was going to figure out what Sandra was hiding, protect these kids, and clear my name from whatever credit card mess she'd left behind. And I was going to do it like I'd handled everything else in my career, with structure, strategy, and the ability to adapt under fire. It wasn't about proving anything to Sandra anymore. It was about making sure her kids didn't grow up thinking this kind of chaos was normal. And somewhere in that blur of pancakes, permission slips, and password resets, I realized something I'd never thought I'd say. The Navy trained me to handle crises, but nothing had trained me for this. I was improvising. And it was working barely. But I still didn't know just how far Sandra had gone behind my back. That part? That was still loading in the background, hidden in a second inbox I hadn't checked in months, and I was about to open it. I logged into the old Gmail account I hadn't touched since I left for deployment. It was mostly junk newsletters, outdated Navy notices, a few auto-pay receipts, but buried between the spam and store coupons was an email with the subject line, Urgent, Child Welfare Concern, Request for Contact. It was from a county caseworker, dated 4 months ago. The message was short, polite, and disturbing. Hi Miss Myers, we're trying to reach Sandra Myers regarding a flagged report involving her children's school. Since she has listed you as a secondary emergency contact, we'd appreciate a call back. I never saw that email. I never knew I was listed as anything. Sandra must have dropped my name onto whatever school or health form she needed to fill out and never bothered to tell me. The timestamp matched the exact week I'd been off-grid on deployment somewhere in the middle of the Indian Ocean, doing 20-hour shifts and eating rehydrated chili out of a pouch. Meanwhile, back home, Sandra was one bad report away from a visit from Child Services, and I was her escape route. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the weight of it. This wasn't just about financial fraud or irresponsibility. This was about those kids being in real danger. And my sister knew it. She just didn't care enough to deal with it herself. By that point, Ethan had started hanging around me more. He wouldn't admit it, but he was watching how I handled things, not just with them but in general. How I made decisions, how I kept things moving. He asked one morning while I was ironing my uniform, "Is it true you jumped out of a helicopter once?" "Not exactly," I said, folding the sleeves. "I was fast roped down. It's different." End quote. He looked impressed for the first time since stepping foot in my house. Later that day, I caught Lily sitting on the floor with her sketchbook. She tried to hide it, but I'd already seen enough to ask. "Can I take a look?" She hesitated, then nodded. The drawings weren't messy or scribbled. They were detailed, controlled, too controlled, like she was trying to organize something her brain couldn't make sense of. One picture showed a woman clearly meant to be Sandra standing next to a man I didn't recognize. He had a beer can in one hand, and his other hand was pushing something off a table. 3 small figures, presumably the kids, were crouched in the corner, eyes wide. No faces. "Who's he?" I asked. She shrugged. "He was around for a while. He broke Ethan's switch. He said we were loud." I didn't push further. Just nodded, thanked her, and made a mental note. That was the second time I'd heard something about a guy Sandra had left the kids with. First from Molly in a tantrum, now in a drawing from Lily. I started to understand why the school had flagged them, why the counselor had tried to reach anyone with a working phone. I also noticed the bruises more clearly now. Molly had a small one on her arm, shaped like fingers. Not fresh, but still visible. Ethan had a scar on his side he refused to explain. Lily? She didn't talk about pain, she drew it. That night, while the kids were watching a movie, I called a Navy legal contact. Not to file charges, not yet, just to ask what the rules were around emergency guardianship in Virginia. He explained that as a blood relative, I could petition for temporary custody if I believed the parent was unfit, especially with supporting evidence. I don't want to take them away from their mom, I said. You're not, he replied. You're keeping them from being hurt again. Big difference. The next morning, I called the school directly and asked to speak with the counselor who'd sent the letter. She sounded relieved to hear from me. I've been trying to reach someone for weeks, she said. Your sister hasn't shown up to a single conference. The kids come in tired, hungry, and with no supplies. They never talk about home. And honestly, they don't act like anyone's looking out for them. I wrote it all down. Every word. Then I asked, if I were to take legal custody for a while, just temporarily, would the school support that? You'd have our full cooperation, she said without hesitation. After that call, I stopped hesitating too. I gathered everything I had, emails, the drawings, the bruises, the notes from school, and started organizing it into a folder. Not for revenge, not for court, not yet, but for proof. In case Sandra ever tried to come back and pretend like none of this happened. I'd been handling it like a babysitting favor for a few days. I didn't fully realize until now. This was a recovery mission. And those kids weren't just guests in my home. They were survivors of a mother who'd chosen to disappear when things got hard. That night, I made grilled cheese for dinner, nothing fancy, just real food, hot and simple. The kind of dinner you make when you're trying to say, you're safe here, without needing to say it. They ate every bite. And for the first time, when Molly handed me her empty plate, she whispered, "Thank you." She didn't smile. She didn't hug me. Just 2 quiet words. It was more than enough. I opened the folder I'd started building and added 2 more items to it. The counselor's notes and a printout of Lily's drawing. It was getting thick, and I knew I wasn't even close to done. The next lead came from something that should have been routine mail. I found a stack of unopened envelopes shoved in the bottom of the kid's suitcase. They were addressed to Sandra, but at my house. Which was strange, considering she'd never lived there. The postmarks dated back 3 months, credit card statements, a few utility shut-off notices, and 1 envelope marked, urgent, final notification. It was from a collections agency. I opened it. The balance was tied to a Target red card opened under the name, Rachel M. Myers. Same fake signature, same handwriting. She wasn't just using my name, she was spreading it across half the county. I made a list of every creditor mentioned in the stack, called each one, and confirmed it. Multiple accounts opened using my identity, with her address, her phone number, and my military ID number. That was the part that really ticked me off. She'd used my official Navy ID. That's not just fraud, that's federal. I called my bank's fraud department and initiated a freeze on my credit. Filed a report, contacted Navy Legal again. They escalated it this time. Told me to keep all documents, save digital copies, and prepare a personal statement. If this leaked into my Navy record unchecked, it could stall my clearance renewal, or worse, and for what? So my sister could buy patio furniture and DoorDash every night? The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. She wasn't just skipping town to find herself. She was drowning in debt she had no plan to pay back. And the kids? They were just collateral. That realization hit hard one afternoon, while I was going through her email on an old iPad Lily left on the counter. I hadn't meant to snoop. I just saw a notification light blinking and swiped out of habit. Turns out the iPad had her Gmail still logged in. And inside that inbox was something I didn't expect, a thread of emails between Sandra and a man named Kyle. Kyle wasn't just some boyfriend. He was someone she owed money to, a lot of it. The emails were messy, vague references to what you said would happen, and I told you I'm not keeping them forever. In one message, she wrote, "They're better off with Rachel anyway. She's a control freak. She'll take care of everything, let her." I stopped reading right there. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because I'd finally seen it for what it was. This wasn't abandonment. This was a handoff. She didn't leave the kids with me out of desperation. She planned it. She counted on me being too responsible to say no, too structured to let them fall apart, and too guilt-ridden to throw them back into the system. And she was right on all 3 counts. I didn't tell the kids what I found. There was no point. What could I say? Hey, your mom's using my name to dodge debt and avoid parenting? Instead, I did what I always do when things go sideways. I got organized. I opened a spreadsheet. Made columns. Date, account name, amount owed, action taken. Every transaction, every fraudulent charge, every message, every lie. I wanted it laid out so clearly. A lawyer wouldn't need to ask a single follow-up question. Then I called a family law attorney. He was blunt. You've got two battles. One is identity theft. That's criminal. The other is guardianship. That's civil. Which one should I start with? I asked. He didn't hesitate. The kids. Get legal custody. Fast. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a printed packet from the attorney's office. 3 kids were watching The Incredibles on the couch, oblivious. It was surreal. They were just trying to enjoy a cartoon. And I was filling out emergency guardianship paperwork because the person who brought them into the world had treated them like furniture she couldn't sell. And here's the thing. I didn't feel heroic. I didn't feel brave. I felt pissed off. I felt tired. I felt used. But I also felt something else responsible. Not in the forced, guilt-tripped way I used to feel growing up with Sandra. This was different. This was quiet. Purposeful. Ethan wandered into the kitchen for water and saw the paperwork. "What's that?" he asked. I shrugged. "Just making sure you 3 can keep staying here. Officially." He didn't say anything. Just nodded slowly and went back to the living room. The nod said more than words would have. I scanned and emailed the forms before bed. The lawyer would file them in the morning. He said the process usually takes a few weeks, but given the school reports and abandoned contact history, we might get a provisional ruling faster. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain was wired like I was back on watch at sea. Somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. I found myself checking on all 3 kids. They were out cold. Ethan had kicked the blanket off again. Molly was hugging that same navy jacket like it was a security blanket. Lily was curled up, her sketchbook still open beside her. The drawing she'd finished? It was the 4 of us, me and the kids, standing under a roof. Not a ship, not chaos, just a house. And everyone was smiling. The provisional custody order came through on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through making pancakes when my phone buzzed. The lawyer's name popped up, followed by one word: approved. No celebration. No dramatic reaction. Just a long, steady exhale. I printed the order and pinned it on the fridge, right between Ethan's spelling test and Lily's stick figure masterpiece. It was official. I wasn't just filling in anymore. I was responsible, legally, fully. The kids didn't ask. They didn't question it. Maybe because deep down, they already knew. With that piece secured, I shifted gears. My Navy training had taught me how to stay calm under pressure, how to plan in layers. I'd used those skills in war games, in emergency drills, in command briefings. Now I was using them for grocery runs and court filings. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was control. Not in the obsessive way my sister accused me of, but in the way that keeps people safe. But I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't want Sandra to face this, to see it all laid bare. I didn't care if she apologized. I didn't want her pity or excuses. I wanted her to see that I'd taken the disaster she left behind and turned it into something she never could: a functioning home. I went full operations mode. I cataloged everything. I scanned every document. I turned a hallway closet into a filing system. School forms, health records, behavior logs, receipts. I even started logging things the kids said, subtle comments about when mom's friend hit the door too hard, or when she forgot we were at school. Small clues, all pointing to a life way more unstable than I ever imagined. Meanwhile, the house started changing. It was slower than I wanted, but it was real. Ethan stopped challenging me over every little thing. I gave him a few tasks, helping with dishes, setting up the Wi-Fi printer, and he took them seriously. Lily kept drawing, but the pictures shifted. Less fear. More color. Molly started hugging me before bed. Always silent, always brief. But there was one night when I caught Ethan sitting alone on the porch after dinner. I stepped outside and sat next to him, without saying anything. After a while, he asked, "Are we gonna have to go back?" "To where?" He shrugged. "Wherever Mom is." I looked him dead in the eyes. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He didn't smile, but I could see his shoulders drop half an inch. That was enough. That week, I also contacted a private investigator. His name was Mike. Retired cop, gruff voice, no small talk. I gave him what I had. Last known location, Sandra's phone number, the fake addresses she used on credit apps. "Why do you want her found?" he asked. "Because I need to know what else she's planning," I said. "And I want it documented." He understood right away. Not for confrontation, for protection. Exactly. Mike got to work. I paid half up front and told him to loop in my attorney with anything he found. While he searched, I met with the school counselor in person. I wanted her on record. We sat in her tiny office, surrounded by finger paintings and anxiety charts. "I'm not trying to villainize my sister," I said, "but I need someone from the school who's willing to speak to what they saw." "You don't need to say anything else," she said. "I've got documentation, dates, missed meetings, notes from teachers. You're not overreacting." That meeting solidified everything. This wasn't about me playing hero. This was about doing what no one else had been willing to do. Stand the hell up and stop the damage. A few days later, Mike called back. "Found her," he said. "Daytona Beach. Checked into a budget motel under her own name. No kids listed, no job history. There's a guy with her records not clean, domestic disturbances, unpaid alimony, the works. Actions." I thanked him, logged the report, and added it to the file. Then I called the lawyer again. "What's our next legal move?" I asked. "We start building for permanent custody," he said. "And if you want to file charges for identity theft, now's the time. You've got a mountain of proof." "I'm not sure I want her in jail," I said. "You don't have to decide that now, but filing a report sends a message." That stuck with me, sending a message. I didn't want to ruin Sandra's life. I wanted her to realize she'd already ruined enough, and that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I'd spent years walking on eggshells around her mood swings, her guilt trips, her woe is me routine. Not anymore. The revenge wasn't going to be some dramatic showdown or screaming match. It was going to be quiet, legal, bulletproof. I was going to protect those kids better than she ever did. And I was going to do it by the book so when she eventually showed up, she'd have nothing to stand on. No lies, no pity stories, no, you don't understand. Because I understood just fine. She made choices, and now I was making mine. Ethan was the first one to ask if he could help with dinner. It wasn't some Hallmark moment. He walked into the kitchen, grabbed a pan without looking at me, and said, "I know how to make eggs, kinda." I said sure, and handed him the butter. That was it. No praise, no speech. Just a shift, subtle, but solid. Lily followed suit later that week. She brought me her backpack before school and said, "Can you check it? I always forget stuff." I opened it up and found it half-packed, the way it always was. But now? She wanted me to see. That mattered more than the contents. And Molly, she finally called me something. Not Aunt Rachel, not hey. She walked up, tugged my sleeve, and mumbled, "Mom?" Then paused. "I mean, not real mom. Just, you know." I didn't correct her. I didn't freeze or turn it into a big thing. I just crouched down and tied her shoe. That morning, I took the long way home after dropping them off at school. Drove around the block twice. Not to kill time but to let my head catch up with my heart. Something had changed. They weren't guests anymore. They were mine, in every way that mattered. At home, I sat down at the table and looked at the stack of documents I'd organized like a mission dossier. Legal forms, incident reports, bank statements, PI updates. It looked like prep for a court-martial. But this wasn't about war anymore. It was about building a family out of shrapnel. The routines we started as survival tactics had turned into something real. Morning alarms, toast with jam, chores without threats, homework without screaming. Not perfect, but stable. They stopped asking when their mom was coming back. Stopped referring to her in the present tense. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even sad. It was just acceptance. I kept waiting for some breakdown. For someone to snap. Instead, I watched 3 kids slowly uncoil. Their jokes got louder. Their tantrums shorter. Ethan started brushing his teeth without being told. Lily stopped hiding her drawings. Molly started sleeping in her own bed. One night, Ethan knocked on my door. "Can I show you something?" He handed me a sheet of paper. A drawing of me in a Navy uniform. "I made it for school. We're supposed to write about someone brave." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing, just nodded, and tucked it into the corner of my mirror. That's when I knew something big had shifted, not just in them, but in me. Before all this, I used to define success in medals, ranks, deployments completed. Now, success was making sure Lily had clean socks, making sure Ethan's math homework made it into his backpack, making sure Molly didn't go to bed afraid. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't get applause, but it felt more solid than anything I'd ever done in uniform. And somehow, that structure born from pure military habit had become a framework for something softer, not control, not rigidity, just dependability. And kids, it turns out, need that more than anything. I still ran a tight ship, lights out at 9, no electronics at dinner, chore chart on the fridge. But I'd stopped barking like a drill sergeant. I didn't need to. They respected it because it made them feel secure, not scared. At work, my Navy friends started to notice. "You seem different," one of them said during a call. "Like, softer." "Don't tell anyone," I said. "It'll ruin my reputation." I laughed, but she wasn't wrong. I'd started measuring strength differently. Not in physical endurance or command presence, but in patience, in consistency, in the ability to stay calm when someone spills milk on your one clean uniform. Mike, the PI, kept updating me. Sandra hadn't left Florida. She'd moved into a different motel. Still no job. Still with the same guy. Her bank account was nearly drained. No sign she'd tried to contact the kids. No custody filings. Nothing. I added it to the file. But at that point, I stopped checking for updates every day. It didn't matter where she was. What mattered was where the kids were, and that was here, with me. One morning, while folding laundry, I found a crumpled piece of paper in Ethan's jeans. I almost tossed it, but something made me flatten it out. It was a list. Things that make me feel safe. When the door is locked at night. When Rachel doesn't yell. When there's real food. When my mom doesn't come back. That last one hit hard. But I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just folded it again and put it in the drawer where I kept their medical records. Because that piece of paper was more important than a diagnosis. That same evening, we ate dinner together like usual. No big moment, just mac and cheese, some baby carrots, and chocolate pudding. Molly told a joke that made no sense, but Lily laughed so hard, milk came out her nose. Ethan rolled his eyes and called them weird. It felt like a family, and it was the first time I didn't feel like I was pretending to be one. It was a Saturday afternoon when she showed up. No call, no warning, just the sound of tires screeching up my driveway and the unmistakable slam of a car door. I looked through the window, and there she was, Sandra, in oversized sunglasses, messy hair piled into a knot, and a tank top that looked 2 days past clean. She had one hand on her hip and the other waving her phone in the air like she was holding a warrant. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Well, look who finally decided to check in," I said. Sandra blew past me like I didn't exist. "Where are my kids?" "Probably where you left them, Sandra. You remember that part, right? When you dropped them off without so much as a toothbrush? I needed a break. You don't know what I've been dealing with." I crossed my arms. "You mean the Florida vacation with your boyfriend? Or the fraudulent credit cards in my name? Or maybe the caseworker emails you ignored?" She turned around fast. "Don't act like you're some hero. You've always thought you were better than me just because you play soldier." I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. Because just then, Ethan walked into the hallway. He froze when he saw her. His face didn't light up. He didn't run. He just stared. Sandra smiled like nothing had happened. "There's my baby boy." Ethan didn't move. "Are you here to take us back?" "Of course, sweetheart. I'm your mom." He looked at me, then back at her. "No, you were gone." Sandra's smile faltered. "Don't be dramatic. It was just a couple weeks." "It's 2%. 10 days, I said, with no call, no contact. And you listed me as an emergency contact on forms you never filled out correctly. You committed fraud, Sandra. Multiple counts." She rolled her eyes. You think you're gonna scare me with big words and your little lawyer friend? You're not taking my kids from me. I didn't take anything, I said. You gave them up the second you walked away without a plan, without food, without even checking if they were okay. Molly peeked out from behind the hallway wall, clutching my sleeve. She saw her mom, then stepped back out of view. That, more than anything, made me want to throw Sandra out by the elbow. But I didn't. I stayed steady. You need to leave, I said. Over my dead body, she snapped. I have a court order. Emergency custody, signed and approved. You can fight it legally if you want, but you're not taking them anywhere today. She laughed like I'd told a bad joke. You really think a piece of paper's gonna keep a mother from her kids? I didn't flinch. I think a sheriff's deputy will. Right on cue, the knock came from behind her. 2 officers stood at the edge of the porch, 1 male, 1 female, calm, professional. I'd called them the second her car hit the driveway. Not because I was scared, but because I knew better than to let emotions decide what happened next. The male officer spoke first. Ma'am, we received a report of a custody dispute. Can we see documentation from both parties? I handed over my copy of the custody order. The female officer took it, read it, and nodded. Sandra was still frozen, caught between defiance and disbelief. You're siding with her? She asked the officers. She's just trying to steal my kids. The male officer responded without emotion. Ma'am, according to this legal document, Miss Myers currently holds emergency custody. You'll need to contest it in court if you disagree. For now, we're going to ask you to step outside. I'm not leaving without them. That was when Lily came down the stairs. Quietly, calmly. You don't get to yell in this house, she said. You're scaring Molly. Sandra turned like she'd been slapped. Excuse me? Lily didn't repeat herself. She just walked over and sat next to Ethan, side by side, choosing their side. I looked at the officers. Can I have a moment to walk her out? They gave me a nod. I stepped outside with Sandra, closing the door behind me. You did this on purpose, she hissed. You were always waiting for a chance to prove you were better than me. No, I said. I was waiting for you to act like a mother. You never did. So I stepped in. You think this is over? I leaned in, my voice level. It's not over, but it's under control. That's more than you ever managed. She stomped back to her car, peeled out of the driveway like a teenager throwing a tantrum, and disappeared. I turned around and exhaled slowly. The porch light flicked on automatically. Behind the front door, I could hear the kids laughing at something on TV. The storm had blown through. And the house, our house, was still standing. The court date landed on a Monday morning, which felt fitting. Nothing says, welcome to the week, like facing down your own sister in a custody hearing. I wore my uniform, not out of pride, but because it reminded me who I was. A service member, a protector, someone who didn't run when things got hard. Across the courtroom, Sandra walked in 10 minutes late, sunglasses on indoors, holding a coffee she somehow still managed to spill. She didn't look at me, not once, just slid into her seat next to a public defender she probably met in the hallway. The judge walked in shortly after, an older woman with sharp eyes and zero patience. Good. I liked her already. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no TV courtroom theatrics, just facts. My attorney presented the emergency custody order, the school reports, the counselor's statement, the bank fraud documentation, and a signed affidavit from Mike, the PI, confirming Sandra's whereabouts and behavior while the kids were with me. The judge read everything carefully. She didn't rush. She didn't interrupt. Sandra, when asked to respond, gave the same speech I'd heard my whole life. I was overwhelmed. I needed a break. My sister has always judged me. She's never liked how I raised my kids. She thinks structure fixes everything, but children need love, not rules. The judge looked over her glasses. And abandoning them without contact for over 10 days, that's love? Sandra shifted in her chair. I didn't abandon them. I left them with family. Without food, medication, or school supplies, my lawyer added. And during that time, Miss Myers also discovered identity theft involving multiple credit accounts and her military ID. Sandra rolled her eyes. She's exaggerating. She has signed statements, photographic evidence, and bank records. the judge replied flatly. I see no exaggeration. There was a pause. Then the judge turned to me. Lieutenant Myers, is it your intention to seek full custody of the children? I looked at the kids, seated behind me with a caseworker. Ethan gave a small nod. Lily squeezed Molly's hand. Yes, Your Honor, I said. It wasn't my plan. But it became my responsibility. And I'm not walking away from that. The judge made her decision on the spot. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to Rachel Myers. Visitation rights for Sandra Myers will be determined pending a psychological evaluation, completion of a parenting plan, and resolution of the open fraud investigation. This is no longer temporary. This is permanent until the court decides otherwise. Sandra didn't shout. She didn't even blink. She just turned to her attorney and muttered, "Figures," like it was a parking ticket, not a ruling that would reshape her children's lives. Afterward, in the hallway, she passed by without a word, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just a flash of resentment in her eyes, the same look she gave me when we were kids, and I got praise she didn't. But this time, I didn't feel small under it. I felt grounded. The kids came up and hugged me, all three at once. I don't cry in uniform, but that moment made my throat tighten. Ethan looked up at me and said, "Does this mean we live with you forever?" I didn't say forever. I said, "You're home." We stopped for milkshakes on the way home, strawberry for Lily, chocolate for Ethan, vanilla for Molly. I didn't get one. Just sat in the booth and watched them laugh at something on Ethan's phone. They didn't seem scared anymore. Or unsure. Just tired and full and safe. Later that night, after they were in bed, I opened my laptop and started drafting a statement for the Navy. Full disclosure. Everything that had happened. The fraud, the custody, the court decision. I knew the risks. My CO would have questions. But I also knew this. I'd rather explain the truth than cover for someone who nearly destroyed my name. I submitted the report and went to bed with the kind of peace that only comes from knowing you did what needed to be done no matter how messy it was. 2 days later, I got an unexpected call from my commanding officer. "Lieutenant Myers," she said, "we received your report. Thank you for your transparency. I'll be honest, it raised a few flags. But after reviewing everything, we also saw something else." I braced myself. "You turned a disaster into structure. You protected 3 kids with no support, handled legal fallout, and kept it clean. That takes leadership. We're not just leaving it at that. We're submitting your name for a commendation." I blinked. "A commendation? For what? Babysitting? For stepping up where most wouldn't," she said. "Don't sell it short." I hung up and sat in silence for a moment. Not because I needed validation, but because I realized something. I'd been holding everything so tight for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be recognized for something other than toughness. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding something my sister tore down, and doing it without becoming bitter in the process. And somehow, that felt like the most Navy thing I'd ever done. The kitchen sink was full of cereal bowls, and someone had clearly tried to microwave something wrapped in foil, but I didn't flinch. That morning felt like any other morning in the house. Chaotic, loud, full of mismatched socks and last-minute backpack checks. And I felt steady in the middle of it. There was a time when a mess like that would have sent me into full-on drill sergeant mode. Now? I handed Ethan the dish towel and raised an eyebrow. He got the message. I wasn't running a boot camp. I was running a home. The transition didn't happen overnight. It took every ounce of discipline the Navy drilled into me over the years. Time management, situational awareness, command presence, all of it translated in ways I never expected. Making sure 3 kids brushed their teeth without a fistfight, same energy as coordinating a crew changeover at sea, field stripping a rifle under pressure, not that different from unclogging a toilet at 3 a.m., while Molly screamed about ghosts. But there was one difference. This mission was personal. The Navy gave me tools, structure, clarity, a sense of identity. It taught me how to stay calm when people around me panicked, how to keep going when everything inside you says stop, but it never trained me for being a parent. That part, I had to improvise. And, weirdly enough, improvisation became my best strategy. Lily started leaving sticky notes on the fridge, little reminders she used to write for herself just to keep from forgetting homework. Now, she wrote ones for me, too. Molly needs new crayons. Ethan left his hoodie in the yard. One morning, I found one that said, "You're doing a good job, even if we don't say it." I left it right there, still haven't moved it. Meanwhile, Ethan started teaching Molly how to tie her shoes. He didn't ask me if he should. I just watched him crouch down next to her on the front porch one morning, talking her through the loops like it was a mission briefing. "You gotta double knot, or they come loose," he said. And Molly? She listened. She actually listened. That's when I knew we were past the survival stage. This wasn't temporary. They weren't waiting for their real life to start again. This was their real life, and it was working. Sandra had gone quiet. No phone calls, no letters, no appeals. My lawyer said she was likely strategizing, which sounded generous, considering her track record. I didn't waste time thinking about it. If she showed up again, I was ready. Every document, every record, every legal block was in place. But deep down, I didn't think she would. She'd always bailed when things got hard. And now that the kids were no longer useful for sympathy or leverage, she'd moved on, probably spinning a story somewhere else, painting herself as the misunderstood victim. That's the thing about people like her. They don't really want help, they want excuses. I stopped needing her to change. I stopped hoping she'd apologize. I'd seen too much, and so had the kids. What mattered now was what came next. The Navy offered me a temporary station reassignment, closer to home, more stable hours, and less travel. I took it without hesitation. Not because I didn't want to deploy again, but because I finally had something I wanted to come home to. That was new. That was huge. I filled out the paperwork while Molly sat beside me, coloring a picture of our house. She gave it 4 windows, a flag, and a weirdly tall chimney. I asked her why it was so high. "So Santa doesn't miss it," she said. Can't argue with that logic. One evening, Ethan pulled out the old photo album I kept tucked behind the bookshelf, snapshots from my deployments, change of command ceremonies, ship life. He flipped through it quietly, then asked, "Do you miss it?" "The Navy?" I said. He nodded. "Sometimes. But I don't miss being gone." "And great." He didn't say anything for a second. Then, just, "I'm glad you're not." That was it. That was the whole thing. No speech, no teary hug, just honesty from a kid who used to barely look me in the eye. Lily started sleeping with the door open again. Molly didn't need the jacket anymore. Ethan stopped pushing back at every rule and started enforcing some of them himself. He once grounded himself from Xbox for mouthing off. I didn't say a word. Just watched him hand over the controller and go read a book. I told one of my Navy friends about that, and she laughed. "That's a weird kind of power," she said. "It's not power," I told her. "It's trust. There's a difference. In the Navy, you lead people who've been trained to follow. In a family, you lead people who are learning what stability even is. And when they choose to follow, not because they're scared, but because they believe in the structure you've built, that's not power. That's something better. It's not perfect, we still argue. The laundry still piles up. I still snap sometimes, and then have to apologize like a grown-up, but we're not lost, we're not guessing. We're a unit now. Not by blood, not by tradition, but by choice. And that out of everything I've faced in uniform or out is the one thing I'm most proud of. The day the final custody paperwork came in the mail, it didn't feel dramatic. There was no background music, no slow motion reaction, just me at the kitchen counter, sorting bills and school forms when I opened the envelope and saw the words, "Permanent legal custody granted to Rachel Myers." I stood there holding it, reading the line twice to make sure I didn't miss anything. It was done, not temporarily, not conditionally. It was real, official, signed, stamped, and sealed. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just laid the paper flat and placed it under a magnet on the fridge, right where the kids could see it. When Ethan came in later and noticed it, he didn't ask questions. He read the line at the top and said, "So it's, like, all the way done?" "It's not roast, all the way," I said. He gave me a nod, grabbed a granola bar, and went back outside like he'd just seen the weather forecast. Nothing more needed to be said. That was how it ended, not with a bang, but with a quiet certainty. The chaos Sandra brought into our lives had been replaced, piece by piece, with something stronger, something that couldn't be undone with a car ride and a suitcase full of excuses. Revenge, I'd learned, didn't always look like what you expect. I never shouted at her. Never dragged her to court in handcuffs. I never embarrassed her in public, even though she handed me every opportunity. Instead, I just kept receipts. I stayed calm. I documented everything. I used the system she thought I wouldn't bother with. And when it was all laid out, clean and unshakable, she had nothing left to fight with. She disappeared completely after the final ruling. No texts, no social media posts, not even a passive-aggressive voicemail. I heard from Mike once more, said she moved out of Florida and last used her debit card in Georgia. That was months ago. Maybe she was trying to start over. Maybe she found someone else to lean on. Or maybe, for the first time in her life, she realized no one was coming to clean up her mess anymore. Either way, I didn't lose sleep over it. I had bigger things to focus on, like how to get 3 kids out the door by 7:30 without forgetting lunchboxes, permission slips, or someone's science project, like teaching Ethan how to mow the lawn without breaking the mower, like explaining to Molly why glitter glue should never, ever be used on pets. Yes, she tried. We became a team, the 4 of us, not always smooth, not always easy, but real. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shows up. The Navy taught me that structure builds confidence, that people thrive when they know someone's got their back. I applied that to the house like I would to a mission. Morning check-ins, clear expectations, celebrating small wins. And it worked. Lily started smiling more, even around strangers. She joined art club and brought home paintings of things that didn't look like chaos or shadows. Ethan tried out for JV baseball, didn't make it, but told me it was worth it to try. Molly started telling knock-knock jokes that made absolutely no sense, and laughed until she snorted. We celebrated holidays with our own weird traditions. Thanksgiving with 3 kinds of mac and cheese, 4th of July with sparklers taped to broomsticks, Christmas with 1 tree and way too many ornaments, half of them bent or missing hooks. And every time one of them called me Mom without hesitating, I felt it in my chest, not because I needed the label but because I knew they meant it. The uniform came off less and less. I still served, but I shifted into a reserve role. My CO supported the decision. The Navy had given me purpose. But this raising 3 kids, who finally felt safe, this gave me something else. One night, long after bedtime, I found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. The kid who once stormed out of every room now quietly asked if I could help with fractions. After we solved the last problem, he said, "You didn't have to do all this, you know." I paused. Do what? Take us in, deal with Mom, fight all that stuff. I shrugged. Yeah, I did. He looked at me. Why? It's 7 twist trimes. Because someone had to. And I wanted it to be me. He didn't answer. But the silence felt full, like something settled between us that didn't need to be spoken out loud. I never set out to be a parent. I never expected to trade deployments for dentist appointments or tactical gear for glitter glue. But I learned that protection isn't just about defending, it's about showing up, every single day, when someone else won't. And Sandra? She gave me the kids thinking it would break me. She had no idea it would become the best thing that ever happened to me. The revenge wasn't in the court ruling. It wasn't in the credit repair or legal wins. It was in this: 3 kids who now laughed more than they flinched, who asked questions without bracing for disappointment, who called a house a home. That was the ending she never saw coming, and the only one that mattered. Thanks for being here. If you care about stories that honor real resilience, real family drama, and real military grit, hit that subscribe button. There's more where this came from. We tell the kind of family revenge stories that stay with you, because they come from the heart, and from people who fight back the right way.